Hey, this is editing me here. I forgot to mention when I was doing the voiceover that in this episode we're playing Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland. The way things are going to go with gameplay is I'm going to start a game, and until I beat that game, that's what's going to be the gameplay in the background, right? So right now it's going to be Kirby. After this, I think I'm going to play Legend of Zelda Link Between Worlds because that's like one of my favorite games of all time. And if there's any game that you'd like to see me play, if it's within the realm of possibility, I'll definitely do my best to do that. Uh, Thank you. Hello, and welcome to The Outlet, the only podcast without a target audience. I'm your host with the most to say, and I hope you're having a great day so far. I want to start today's episode talking about an experience I had recently, right? I went to the mall, and, I go to Hot Topic, right? And Hot Topic has interesting variety of things there, shirts and whatnot. That's what I go there for, right? And, they had this pretty nice Venom t-shirt, it was the cover of Lethal Protector 1, which is, is the first, main comic that Venom has, that's not like he appears in a Spider-Man issue, right? And it was pretty good, and, so I just grabbed it, and I went to the register, and, the girl there was, she brought up, oh, if you get, it's, on sale if you get another one, and I'm like, alright, cool. And so I go back, and there's not really anything else Marvel that's there that I like, and I like Fallout, and so I grabbed it, and it was good. It was a good, $40 or whatnot. Well, together, And, and then she starts talking to me, right? She's like, oh, did you get tickets already for Spider-Man? And I'm like, yeah. And, we have a little bit of a conversation about that, right? And I ask her, have you got yours yet? And she's like, yeah, but, I'm gonna go later, right? Because I had said, she asked me if I was gonna go, Thursday or release day. And I was like, yeah, right? And then, I got my stuff and I left, and it was alright. But the problem with that interaction is that I don't really think it went the way I wanted to. Mainly in part because I lied about getting tickets for Spider-Man already. I didn't know what else to say. She asked me about it, and I was just like, yeah, I did. And then whatever, she kept asking me whatever, and I was just like, yeah. And right, it was like I didn't even want another shirt. That I just went in and I saw the Venom one, and I'm like, all right, cool, this is what I'm here to get, right? And then she brought up this discount, whatever, and I'm like, okay, yeah. Okay, I'll be right back. And not that there's anything necessarily wrong with how that went. I just feel like, I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to be dishonest. And not that there was anything really harmful about it. But I think it just kind of goes to show the kind of person that I am. Not a very confident one, to say the least. And I'll be honest about that. Right? But then again, I think everybody has their off days. Everybody looks a little differently in their head compared to how they actually act. We all have some sense of ego, right? And that was definitely, the real me, I guess, breaking through and making an appearance, right? And with that in mind, it brings me back to why do a podcast, right? And I think another thing for me, other than just, having an outlet to talk about my interests or other things like that, right? I guess it's sort of meant to be a practice, I guess, to get used to talking, I think I do pretty well, talking with people like friends and family and whatnot. And yeah, I can fumble my way through transactional interactions. I can go to McDonald's and order my food for myself. I don't need somebody else to come and do that for me, right? I'm capable enough, But I do still struggle, I guess, with getting my point across and, putting exactly into words what I want to say, right? I very easily fall into the trap of I know what I'm trying to say, but nothing sounds right. And so I just keep talking in hopes that it gets my point across and that it sounds right. And usually it doesn't. But that's what practice is for, right? That's what, hindsight is 2020, as they say. And so I think going through with this, podcast idea, right, also gives me a good opportunity to practice, conversation skills, I guess. I mean, not really, since I'm not really talking to anyone directly. But what are you gonna do? Right? And yeah, just getting into the habit of talking more, I'm also the kind of person that's like, maybe in some interactions, like, I won't really talk, but that doesn't mean I'm not having a good time. Sometimes I just like being quiet and, like, reserved, but, it's not entirely true to my character, right? I'm a very complex sort of person, and I don't know about the issue with that, right? Not that there's, again, necessarily an issue, but I guess it just sort of comes from this belief that, yeah, I can be better, right? And everyone can be better, Nobody's perfect, right? And so there's always room to improve, in my mind. And I'm the kind of person who, I'll look at the good things about me, for example, right? And I'll be like, okay, those are good things. Those things don't really have to change. And so I'll start looking at the bad things, and I'll be like, okay, that's where things need to change, Because those are the things I don't like, right? Those are the things I need to get rid of, And so working on that is part of what I have to do, right? And again, that's part of why I'm doing this podcast, right? My ideal is to do weekly episodes, right? Post an episode maybe every Friday. I don't know when this one will come out. Hopefully it's on a Friday, right? And, just getting into the habit of, like, working in a consistent schedule, right? The way I'm doing this usually, is I'll record the voiceover first, right? Just so I have about an idea for how long I need to, play video games, I guess, right? Which is the other half of it, and then I'll, like, edit it, I guess, or put something, I don't really know exactly yet, and then, I'll post the video, right? It is still a sort of, I don't want to say low effort kind of production, but, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things out there on YouTube, or just like this, that have a lot more effort put into them, I'd like to say, right? And yeah, maybe it's just that they're more edited, right? Or they have, like, actual, I don't know, right? It's a very bare bones sort of thing, because again, there's not a lot of editing, right? Maybe I'll cut out a few awkward pauses, or, trim things down, right? But it's like, that's really it, and then the gameplay is just like, yeah, I talk for a while, and then I play video games for that same amount of time, and then I put them together, and that's that. I don't really know how to improve on that formula, I don't know how to, like, at least, if I continue making content like this, which for now is what I'm gonna do, make more, like, podcast style things, right? And maybe some people aren't even watching the gameplay. Maybe they're just listening to me talk, and that's okay, And so it's like, yeah, I don't really know how to improve on what I'm doing, other than, stuff that doesn't have to do with the video itself, like, oh, how I talk and what I talk about, right? Introduce more structure, I guess. But again, I don't really know how to go through with that, or like what to do in that regard, you know. And so right now, the point really is just, yeah, you know, to get into the habit of doing something, you know, doing something that's productive and tangible, you know. Like me as a writer, you know, I've been saying I'm a writer for maybe like the past 5 years now, right? But I haven't ever really written something that's like readable, you know? I haven't written like a short story or a novel or anything like that I can like give out and be like, hey, look, here's this thing that I wrote. You can go read it, right? Unlike this podcast, which is like, hey, look, here's me talking for 40 minutes or however long, right? And in that regard, you know, the first like pilot episode was 40 minutes, right? And I don't know exactly what an ideal length of time would be for, you know, you as my audience, right? Maybe shorter, maybe longer, right? Because I can go on for quite a while, if you let me, you know. So maybe, right, in the comments or something, you know, what would you prefer, right? If it be shorter or longer or about the same length, let me know. And so, yeah, right, it's just about trying to make content, you know, make something that people can see and interact with, right? Maybe they, you know, give them something to do, right? Something to have on in the background, or, you know, maybe they want to watch me play Minecraft or something else, right? You know. And yeah, right? It feels good to have something like that, have something that people can interact with, and I can be like, yeah, you know, I made something, right? And in that regard too, it's like, you know, oh, why don't I really write things? You know, and I do write things. I write a lot of like world building stuff and like character backstory and like lore, and world building and whatnot, right? But to me, all that stuff kind of seems like blueprints, you know? It feels like I'm drafting out like my idea for story and things like that, right? And I do have, you know, some semblance of an idea for like how I would write, you know, like a comic series, or like a novel series, or maybe if I were to make a video game, something like that, right? I have an idea for how the story would go. You know, I just haven't really put it in a medium that, again, is interactable. You know, it feels like watching the behind the scenes of a movie production without having the movie itself. You know, that's just about what I have that I've made, right? And in that regard, right, like, oh, you know, I can make a podcast and I can post it on YouTube, right? People can interact with that. I don't really know how to go about people, or like interacting with my writing, you know? I don't know where I would really post that, right? Or like, because the thing with me is with writing, you know, it's like I can very easily, I suppose, write a novel, you know, like a book or something, right? But I think there's other mediums that are just a lot more fun to engage with. And nothing wrong with people who like reading, you know, but I don't. I would much rather, you know, maybe read a comic book because there's pictures in it. You know, everybody loves pictures, right? Or, you know, a movie or a video game because yeah, duh, there's pictures, right? Or a video game, you can actually play the thing, you know, right? And so, but those things are not really within my realm of expertise. You know, like drawing, for example, if I were to make comics, right, is something that I've been meaning to get better at for about as long, if not longer, than I've been a writer, you know? And I never really have gotten better, I guess, just because, for the most part, I don't really do it, you know? I mean, I've been drawing a bit recently, you know? And I feel like I've gotten better, right? I've definitely put like more thought and like planning into like how I draw things, and so yeah, you know, that's improvement, right? But again, the thing with me is it's like I want to say I strive for perfection when it comes to, personal projects like this, right? But, obviously I'm not going to have the talent or the skill as professionals, when it's something I barely do myself, right? So obviously, if I were to make a comic right now with the skills that I have, right, it would probably be about as good as what I imagine, like, little kids would draw. Better than that. I'm better than, like, a 5-year-old, right? But, safe to say there's a lot of other people out there who are a lot more talented than me in drawing, right? And I don't know, right? If that's something you'd like to see, right? I mean, I have ideas for, like, me doing my own, like, Spider-Man run. It's like my take on Spider-Man and all those assorted characters. If that's something you'd be interested in, again, let me know, and maybe if there's demand, there will be supply, right? Supply and demand, everybody loves that. And yeah, again, it's like I've been talking, I'm a writer, but I don't really talk about any of that stuff that I write, even if I do have, like, all this world building and all these characters and, all this drafting stuff. And if this is really my passion, which I like to think it is, I hope it is, right? Yeah, why don't I put more work into it, right? Why don't I put more work into not having awkward interactions with the cashier at Hot Topic, right? And, baby steps, right? Maybe this is one of those steps, making this podcast and talking about my experiences, like embarrassing myself at Hot Topic. And, that's just how things go, right? I'm sure we all have had embarrassing experiences, right? Some of them we've forgotten, some of them we haven't, some of them we wish we'd forget, But we can't really spend all this time thinking about what we should do or would do. Then we should doing those things, right? Maybe instead of, taking all this time meticulously planning, I should just do something, right? And that's what this is, because this is a very easy, again, as I've said, very easy sort of thing to produce because it's just me talking and just me playing video games with nothing else really in the mix. So it's very easy to produce, right? Which, if I were to do this on a smaller scale also, right, like shorter than 40 minutes or so, right, maybe I could do more, or more often, right, maybe not weekly, but bi-weekly, Who knows, right? Who knows? Everything is subject to change. And great segue, right? All this talk about professionals, like professional stuff and like the business end, I guess, of this, right? I want to change the topic to something more fun, I guess. Not that this isn't interesting, but, something more fun, right? And, a bit ago I wrote like a list of topics that I would, maybe bring up, right? Because even if, the point is I'm just rambling, right? It is still good to have some semblance of structure, And one of the things I put on the list was, travel, right? And I've been to quite a few places, right, in my life, I live in California. First, I live in LA, so, LA is the place to be, right, if you want to be stuck in traffic forever, right? But I've been other places, I've been to Vegas, which I can say is interesting as somebody who, for the most part, can't do the thing that people go to Vegas for, which is gambling, right? There's lots of other things in Vegas that I do, when I've been, right? Like food is the main thing. I am a huge food person. I love food, right? I'll go anywhere if there's food, And so, yeah, Vegas has some pretty good restaurants and whatnot, and they have other stuff like entertainment. They have all these like shows and performances, and those are pretty cool. I've been to quite a few of the Cirque du Soleil shows they have over there. And those are always interesting, right? And they have like other stuff like arcades and whatnot, and pools, which I've sort of fallen out of my appreciation for. I don't know. I'm not really much of a pool sort of person anymore, right? I definitely was a lot more when I was a kid, right? I'd go to the pool a lot, and that was like the main thing, I guess, we did, me and my family, when we went to Vegas. But these days I'm not really into that anymore, right? Or like the beach, I used to really like going to the beach as a kid, and I still do, but I'm a lot more chill about it, I guess, right? Like, yeah, I don't like getting into the water, I'll kind of just like, maybe just sit down and relax, right? Just watch the ocean, admire it from afar, right? And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I just sort of have this issue with being wet that I've noticed, right? Like, whenever I get out of the shower or the pool, and I'm just like dripping water, I really don't like that. And I have no idea why, because I feel like this is, in my mind at least, sort of a new thing that's happened to me. I don't remember feeling this way as a kid, And so it's sort of recent, right? But it's like, yeah, I'll be in the shower and I'll be constantly wet because I'll be like, from the shower, right? And that'll be fine. Or like if I were to be in the pool, that's fine because my whole body is constantly wet, right? But if I'm just like, dripping wet, like I'm in between being wet and drying myself, it's like that's what bothers me. It's also why, like, now that it's been really hot, and I'm kind of sweaty, it's just like, this is really horrible. This is a horrible feeling. Not only that I'm hot, right, but it's just like, I don't know why I don't like being wet, right? It's a very weird phenomenon I've noticed about myself, but back to Vegas, right? I kind of do like Vegas. I like it's very colorful, kind of loud, right? And that's nice, I like the lights and all that, the aesthetic of Vegas, the smell of cigarettes. It's wonderful, right? I've been to other places too, I've been to Utah. I have family that lives in Utah, and Utah's alright. It snows there. That's about as much as I can say about it, And I've been to New York. I went to New York last year. Yeah, last year I went to New York, and it was pretty great. It's a pretty great experience, It was a lot of walking around, right? Which was good. Good to get those steps in, right? We did a lot of the touristy things in New York, obviously, right? Like we went to Central Park, we went to the Statue of Liberty, we went to the Natural History Museum, that sort of stuff, We went on the double-decker bus and we drove around, a tour of New York, right? And a lot like Vegas, I like the aesthetic of New York, It's like, because everything happens in New York, lots of movies and whatnot is in New York, right? It's very glamorized in our pop culture, I guess, But I think New York lives up to, the hype, I think, right? And again, they have some pretty good food, so I'd recommend, right? And yeah, my favorite part of the New York trip was going to the Natural History Museum. I'm a big museum guy. I love museums, right? And my favorite part of the Natural History Museum in New York, and the one in LA, is the whole, like, areas with those animal dioramas, where it's like, they recreate, like, the animals, like, habitat, and they're there, like, as little, I don't know what I would call them. Not like figures, because it's like life-size, but like models, or just replicas of like animals and in their like habitats and whatnot, right? And that's really cool. I really like that sort of vibe, right? And again, they have other stuff like, you know, artifacts and whatnot, right? I really love that stuff, right? History was my favorite subject in school, you know, and I think why I like history has a lot to do with the fact that I like world building. And history is just world building in real life. You know? History is just world building in real life. And it's always been interesting to me, you know, specific time periods, right? Like everybody loves the Roman Empire, everybody loves World War II, right? Everybody loves the Wild West, you know? But other like less, not necessarily less interesting, but less mainstream historical periods that I like. You know, I like Mesopotamia, you know, like early society or civilization, right, for humanity, or, you know, some of the more modern, like American history, you know, like in the 1800s, or, you know, the late 1700s when America was founded, right, or like world history sort of stuff, you know, and all this like, you know, how trade was very important back then and still is, right? And how a lot of society revolved around trade and whatnot, right? And all these like famous revolutions, like the French Revolution and the American Revolution, and all that sort of stuff. History is very interesting to me, which is why I'm very confused. It's not what I went to college for, right? I applied to go to college for computer science, and in my head it's like, oh, it pays well, and I can make video games. But then I went to college, and I did computer science, and it sucked. I did not like coding at all, right? And my mom's always been like, well, why don't you do history? You really like history, right? And in the past I was just like, yeah, but it doesn't really align with what I want to do, you know? I don't think that's true, right? In my head, it was like, okay, computer science, I can do video games, this is how I tell stories, right? And it pays well as a backup, you know? Because chances are I won't be making video games for me, I'll be making video games for a big company, right? Where I will have very little say in what the video game actually is or is about, you know? And when that's the way I thought about, you know, with history, is it's like, well, how the hell am I going to tell the stories that I want to tell when my whole job would be telling stories about things that have already happened, right? But just because I am not the one who created a story doesn't mean I can't tell it well, you know? Just because it's not something that I myself am responsible for doesn't mean I can't make it engaging and fun, because I think it's engaging and fun. I love history, right? And I love talking to people. Maybe I should be a history teacher because it combines those two things, right? Maybe I should, you know, change what I go to college for or whatever and do history because that's something I actually like and am interested in and have experience in. Because, let me tell you, I've had no experience in coding or whatever computer science stuff before I took a coding class in college, and it was the absolute most annoying and frustrating thing I've ever done in school. So far, anyway. Right? There's a lot of other little things like that that I think are things that I'm interested in, but I don't know how I would really feel about going to college for them, right? Like archaeology, right? Because that's like history, you know? Or paleontology, because I like dinosaurs, right? Who doesn't like dinosaurs? You know? Stuff like that. Or psychology, right? Psychology is the other one that I'm like, this is something that I do have a genuine interest in. That's like something I can go to school for, you know? But I chose computer science. like an idiot. Not that I am an idiot for wanting to, or not that you would be an idiot for computer science, but just that I am an idiot for tunnel vision, video games. Yes, that's why I want to do computer science. Right? When, again, my interest, which is storytelling, is a lot more broader than that, especially considering that, the sort of passion that I have, storytelling, is something that's very easily doable no matter what I do, right? I can be a construction worker, and that can have nothing to do with storytelling, but nobody's stopping me from just writing novels or making comics on the side, right? Especially if I want to be like an indie creator or producer, whatever, right? I'd have to be doing that stuff on the side, because there's no way, right, that I would be able to live off of making comics or whatever as a startup, Like if I wanted to do YouTube professionally, I'd still need to get a job to hold me off until YouTube starts paying me, right? Because that's even if I become a successful YouTuber, right? That's even if my videos crack 100 views, or more realistically, I think to start getting paid it'd be in the thousands, right? But baby steps, right? And so, I don't know. I think what I need to do is just sort of have a complete re-evaluation of my priorities, right? And sort of get aligned with what it is that I should be doing and how I can relate that back to what I want to do, Because I want to do stuff, right? Everybody wants to do stuff. I want to do stuff, right? I want to take these characters and these worlds that I've created and share them with other people, right? These ideas that I have, they can't just stay in my head, And YouTube is a great way to express them, for now, right? Talking about things like that, right? In a podcast is a great way to go about it, I think, for me. Maybe as time goes on, I think of better ways, right? Maybe I start getting better at drawing, and I can make a comic, and I can start posting it online somewhere, and people will read it, and I can be like, hey, look, here's this comic that I made. Go read it, and then I can feel accomplished, and go to sleep with a smile, right? But baby steps, Not too small, because then we don't get anywhere. Right? Life should be a lot more about doing than thinking about doing. That's always been my motto, because that's the exact advice I should listen to. I should take my own advice. Right? Back to travel, though. The other major place that I've been to, besides New York and Vegas, was Europe. I went to Europe also last year for a good 2 weeks. It was a nice tour of Europe, right? I went to Spain and France and Italy and some other country I can't think of. Can't remember. It's the little one that's like in between France and Italy. Is it Monaco? I think it's Monaco, right? I went to those places and it was really nice, it was really nice looking at this old architecture. That was another thing about New York that I was honestly surprised that I liked, was the architecture. I liked looking at the old buildings, right? Because it's like, they do look really cool, especially when you live in LA and a lot of the buildings are sort of copy and paste, like, I don't even know what they'd be made of. That's not right. It's a lot of these samey looking buildings, that don't really look that interesting. And that's why it pisses me off seeing that like modern like furniture trends is like very minimalist and like everything's white and like glossy, and it's like, dude, that's boring, right? Why can't we go back to like the 70s when everything was like all colorful and stuff, right? That's what I would put in my house because that's what actually looks nice, not this, you know, glorified, what are they called? Oh, glorified mental hospitals, you know, with all this white everywhere. But yeah, Europe was really good. Again, pretty great food, you know. I remember joking, it was like, oh, we're gonna go to Italy, and I'm never gonna want Olive Garden again. And the food was good, but I'll be honest and say I still do find myself wanting Olive Garden every once in a while, right? But yeah, I went to some pretty interesting places. I went to in Italy, which was the main place that we went to in the tour, right? We went to Venice and Florence and Rome. We did a lot in Rome. We even went to the Vatican. I'm proud to say that I've been blessed or whatever in the Vatican. And I'm not a religious person, personally, you know. But, right, I went because my grandma goes on these trips with her church or whatever, and she invited me and my cousin to go on this time, because why not, right? And so we were both like, yeah! And so we went to Europe, and it was great, and it was, because it was a religious church thing, we went to all these churches, and it was kind of awkward, because I'm not a religious person, and before that trip, I can probably count on my hand how many times I've been to church. So it was a very interesting experience in that regard. Very awkward one, honestly, but it was still really interesting, and I'm happy that I went. I'm happy that I went to all these churches and felt kind of bad about myself, you know, for not being a religious person, even if, you know, you could not be religious, that's okay, right? Again, I'm not religious. It just felt very weird because it just felt like, I shouldn't be here, this isn't where I'm supposed to belong, or this isn't where I'm supposed to be. That sort of feeling. Right? That's how I felt. You know? The one thing I didn't like about the trip, though, was that it was a lot of driving. I'd honestly say about half the trip, maybe more, was spent in the tour bus, driving from place to place. Right? Entire days were spent just driving. And that was honestly a horrible experience. Because it was just so boring. You know? If I were to go back to Europe, which hopefully I do, I would just want to be in one place and do everything there. Like, I would just go to Rome and do everything there. Or just go to Paris and do everything there. We went to Paris too, by the way. And I did say before that New York definitely held up to my expectations in regards to, you know, the aesthetic and the atmosphere. But Europe kind of didn't. And I think the thing with that is it's like, I think those places are a lot more glamorized in pop culture. In American pop culture, I like to think especially. Right? But then I went there, and it's like, Rome is just a normal, like, urban city, right? Like, yeah, they have the Colosseum and all that cool stuff, you know? But there's also, like, graffiti in places, and there's, like, you know, the sketchy parts of the neighborhood, just like there would be, like, in LA or in New York, right? And in New York, it's like, yeah, okay, it's New York. Of course, there's going to be these sorts of places, right? That's how I think of it, you know? But I wasn't expecting that in Paris or Rome, right? And so it kind of caught me off guard, and I was just like, oh, you know? Not that it was bad. I think it was just very intriguing, you know? The reality of the fact that there's probably homeless people in Rome or Paris or Madrid, right? I feel like a lot of people don't really consider those things, right? Paris syndrome is a real thing, you know? I felt that. I went to Paris and I was like, wow, this is kind of like New York in a bad way. But it was still a pretty good trip, right? I saw the Eiffel Tower, you know, that's great. Again, I went into the Vatican, and nobody's going to be able to do that for another 25 years or so. I think. So, lucky me, right? Lucky me that I get to go on these things, you know? And some of the people that I know have never even been to Disneyland, right? And I'd been going to Disneyland for my birthday for about most of my life, right? Nowadays, I've kind of fallen out of that, theme parks as a whole, really. But Disneyland, I suppose, more, just because I'd been going so often, right? I'm very much more chill about how I go about birthdays these days. It's just like, yeah, let's just go out to eat or something. That's all I want now. And it's good enough, right? It doesn't need to be some spectacular thing if that's not what I want, right? So what are you gonna do? But yeah, despite the reality of urbanization in Europe, it was still a pretty pleasant experience, right? It was something I'd like to do again. Not in that exact way, As I said, I would hate to spend all that time driving, right? Maybe a nice week or weekend in Rome or Paris or Barcelona is good enough, right? And then you go back home to the beautiful US of A and you just think, wow, what a great country to be in, maybe that's a topic for another video, right? But when I've talked about my travel experiences with other people, right? They say that I'm a well-traveled person, right? And yes, I think so. I think maybe the thing with me in that regard is maybe I do just have sort of it's a disparity between what the average and my travel experience is, right? Ignoring the fact that a majority of people probably can't say that they've been in the Vatican, right? A lot of people probably can't say they've been to Paris and Italy and Spain, right? Or New York, or Vegas, or even Disneyland, right? And so I'm grateful that I've been able to go on these trips, right? It's pretty cool. And when it comes to where else I'd like to travel, I think maybe other places in Europe I hadn't been to, like England, I guess, or Ireland, right? I'd like to go up there and see like all those castles, right? Again, surprisingly, I'm into architecture like that, and so going to see all this nice architecture that's not just copy and paste, suburban hell is interesting and something that I want to do, right? But also Japan, right? Everybody wants to go to Japan, and I am one of them, because a lot of the things I like are from Japan, right? I'm a huge video game guy, and a lot of video games come from Japan. I'm not a big anime guy, honestly, but that stuff's still in Japan, and it's cool. Maybe I'll go to Japan and I'll be more into anime because I went to Japan, and I can say that. I can say that I've been to Japan, and then I'd be more into anime because of it, right? I don't know. And where else do I want to go? I don't know. I think Japan and maybe like Europe again, right? Like Ireland, I guess. They're like the two main places that I would want to go to. Oh, there's gotta be somewhere else. Maybe Korea? South Korea, I guess, because it's like... I don't know. But that being said, we're gonna cut it here. I want to thank you all again for watching or listening, and if there's anything you'd like to hear, me talk about, right? You can put that in the comments below. Anything you'd like to hear my opinion on, or a question you might have for me, right? And also let me know if what length is ideal for content like this, right? Would you rather it be longer or shorter, right? Because I think if it's shorter, I can definitely post more often. Not that it would be less work to do, it ironically be more, or no. I think maybe just if I posted shorter, I'd feel better about posting more, right? Because again, this is a very low effort sort of production, and so I can kind of just do this whenever, right? But if it's shorter, right, I'd probably post more often, and so it'd be about, on average, the same amount of content, right? But yeah, let me know if you would rather it be shorter or longer or about the same length. And yeah, thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.